The grand hall of the celestial palace stretched upward into shadows that no torch could fully banish. Crystalline pillars rose like frozen waterfalls, their surfaces reflecting the bioluminescent moss that provided the only light in this underground kingdom. King Vorian sat upon his obsidian throne, his 4 eyes scanning the assembled courtiers with the weight of 3 centuries of rule. In the corner, nearly invisible against the dark stone, sat Princess Lyra. She occupied a small cushioned bench that servants had placed there years ago, positioned where she would be out of the way during court proceedings. Her pale violet skin marked her as royalty among the Keldari people, but her eyes told a different story. Where other Keldari possessed 4 gleaming orbs, capable of seeing across multiple spectrums of light, Lyra's remained clouded and sightless, a defect present since birth. The court ignored her with practiced ease. Nobles swept past without acknowledgement. Advisors debated policy as though she were merely another piece of furniture. Even her own siblings conducted their affairs with barely a glance in her direction. To the Keldari, who prized sensory perception above all other qualities, blindness represented the gravest of misfortunes. Lyra had learned long ago not to expect otherwise. She sat quietly, listening to the rhythms of the court, building mental maps from sound and air currents. She knew who approached by the pattern of their footsteps, recognized moods by the subtle shifts in breathing. The world she experienced was different from that of her people, but it was hers. The arrival of the human delegation disrupted the usual patterns. Humans had only recently made contact with the Keldari Empire, their small exploratory vessel stumbling upon the underground cities quite by accident. Diplomatic relations were new, fragile, and filled with mutual curiosity. The Keldari found humans peculiar, with their limited sensory capabilities and strange fixation on things like art and music. Humans found the Keldari equally baffling, with their 4 eyes and their dismissive attitude toward anything that could not be quantified through enhanced perception. Ambassador Marcus led the human delegation into the throne room. He was a tall man with graying hair and the cautious dignity of someone navigating unfamiliar waters. Behind him came a small team of diplomats and cultural specialists, each trained to observe and adapt to alien customs. Among them walked James, a junior cultural attaché on his first deep space assignment. He was younger than the others, less polished, but possessed of a genuine curiosity that academic training had not yet crushed. As the delegation made their formal approach to the throne, James's gaze wandered across the hall, taking in details that his superiors were too focused to notice. That was when he saw Lyra. She sat perfectly still, her face turned slightly toward the delegation, but not quite focused on them. Something about her posture spoke of careful invisibility, of someone trained to occupy space without claiming it. James frowned, noting how the Keldari courtiers moved around her without acknowledgement, how even the servants seemed to look through her. The formal greetings proceeded with careful protocol. King Vorian welcomed the humans in the traditional manner, his deep voice resonating through the chamber. Ambassador Marcus responded with equal formality, presenting gifts and expressing hopes for mutual prosperity. The whole affair would take hours, James knew, filled with ritualized exchanges and diplomatic niceties. After the initial presentations concluded, the court took a brief recess. Refreshments were brought out, and the Keldari nobles mingled with the human visitors, each side carefully studying the other. James found himself adrift in the social current, not senior enough to join the important conversations, but expected to observe and learn. His feet carried him toward the corner where Lyra sat up close. He could see her more clearly. She appeared young by human standards, though he knew Keldari aged differently. Her features were delicate, and her clouded eyes stared at nothing in particular. She wore fine clothing, but it was simpler than what the other nobles displayed, as though even her garments should not draw attention. "Hello," James said. Unsure if the translator implant would properly convey his greeting, Lyra's head turned toward him with surprising precision. "You are one of the humans." "Yes, my name is James. I'm with the diplomatic delegation. I am Lyra." She paused, as if deciding whether to continue. "The king's daughter." James glanced back at the throne, where several other of the king's children stood in positions of prominence. "Why are you sitting here alone?" "Because I am blind." She stated it as simple fact, without self-pity. "I cannot see the world as my people do, so I am of little value to the court." The bluntness of it caught James off guard. In human society, such a statement would have been met with immediate contradiction, with assurances of worth beyond physical capability. But Lyra spoke as though describing the weather, something unchangeable and universally accepted. "May I sit with you?" James asked. Lyra tilted her head, clearly surprised. "If you wish, though it will not enhance your standing with the court." "I'm not particularly worried about that at the moment." James settled onto the bench beside her, maintaining a respectful distance. Around them, he could feel the weight of Keldari attention, though none approached or spoke to them. "They will think you strange," Lyra said. "We Keldari do not spend time with those who cannot contribute to our sensory understanding of the universe. It is seen as wasteful." "Then I suppose humans are very wasteful by your standards." James smiled, though he knew she could not see it. "We often spend time with people simply because we enjoy their company. An inefficient use of resources." "Perhaps. But efficiency isn't everything." They sat in silence for a moment. James watched the court proceedings resume, nobles and advisors returning to their positions. He noticed how carefully they avoided looking toward the corner where he and Lyra sat, as though acknowledging them would somehow be improper. "What is it like?" Lyra asked suddenly. "Being human. Your people only have 2 eyes, and they see far less than ours. Yet you do not seem diminished by it." James considered the question. "I suppose we don't think of ourselves as diminished. We just see the world differently. And we've found other ways to understand things beyond sight." "Such as?" "Well, we create art, music. We tell stories. We build relationships based on shared experiences rather than shared perceptions." He paused. "We value things that can't necessarily be seen or measured. That concept is difficult for my people to grasp." Lyra's expression remained neutral, but James detected a note of something in her voice. Interest, perhaps. To the Keldari, if something cannot be perceived through our enhanced senses, it holds little meaning. "What do you think?" The question seemed to startle her. "I do not know. I have only my hearing, my touch, my sense of air movement. I experience the world through limited channels. By Keldari standards, my perspective is worthless." "But it's still a perspective," James said. "It's still a way of understanding reality. Just because it's different doesn't mean it has no value." Over the following days, as the diplomatic negotiations continued, James found himself repeatedly drawn to the corner where Lyra sat. Each time, he would ask permission to join her, and each time, after a moment of surprise, she would agree. They spoke of many things during those conversations. He told her about Earth, about human history and culture, about the diversity of perspectives that humans not only accepted but celebrated. She described the underground cities of the Keldari, the complex social hierarchies built around sensory capability, the beauty of things she could only experience through description. The other humans began to notice. Ambassador Marcus pulled James aside after the 3rd day. "The Keldari are confused by your behavior," the ambassador said, his tone more curious than accusatory. "You're spending significant time with the king's blind daughter. They don't understand why. Does it matter?" James asked. "In diplomacy, everything matters. But I'm not telling you to stop. In fact, the king himself has commented on it. He seems intrigued by the concept that we would value interaction with someone the Keldari consider limited. She's not limited. She's just different. Marcus studied him for a long moment. Continue as you have been. But be prepared for the fact that your actions are being watched and analyzed. We're teaching them something about human values, whether we intended to or not. The turning point came during a formal dinner on the 7th day. The great hall had been prepared with elaborate care, tables laden with foods from both human and Keldare traditions. The seating arrangements placed the most important figures at the center, with prominence decreasing toward the edges. Lyra, as expected, had been seated at the farthest table, nearly in the shadows. James had been assigned a seat of moderate importance, befitting his junior status. When the time came to take their places, he walked past his designated chair and continued to the far table where Lyra sat. Alone, the hall fell silent, every eye in the chamber fixed upon the young human as he pulled out the chair beside the blind princess and sat down. The breach of protocol was obvious even to someone unfamiliar with Keldari customs. Assigned seating at formal functions reflected social hierarchy with mathematical precision. To abandon one's proper place was to reject the entire system. King Vorian rose from his throne. His 4 eyes focused on James with an intensity that made the young man acutely aware of how alien the Keldari truly were. The silence stretched, becoming uncomfortable. Human James, the king's voice rolled across the hall like distant thunder. You have abandoned your assigned seat. Do you find it inadequate? James stood, meeting the king's gaze as steadily as he could manage. No, your majesty. The seat is fine, but I prefer to sit with my friend, your friend. The king descended the steps from his throne, moving with the fluid grace of his species. He approached the far table where James and Lyra sat, the entire court watching. You consider my blind daughter your friend? Yes, your majesty. Why? What value does she offer you? She cannot share enhanced perceptions. She cannot contribute to sensory understanding. By all measures my people value, she is incomplete. James felt Lyra tense beside him. He chose his words carefully. Your majesty, if I may be direct, your people and mine measure value very differently. Humans don't determine worth based solely on sensory capability. We value wisdom, kindness, perspective, and companionship. Princess Lyra possesses all of these qualities. She understands her world in ways that are different from yours, but no less valid. That she experiences reality through different channels doesn't diminish the depth of that experience. The king stood before them now, towering and imposing. You truly believe this? I do, your majesty. And if our peoples are to build meaningful relations, perhaps understanding this difference in how we value individuals would be useful. For a long moment, nothing happened. Then King Vorian did something unexpected. He pulled out a chair at the same table and sat down across from his daughter and the human who had befriended her. Tell me. Lyra, the king said, and James heard something in his voice that might have been old grief. What do you think of this human's words? Lyra's clouded eyes remained unfocused, but her voice was steady. I think that humans see worth where we see limitation, Father. And perhaps there is wisdom in that perspective. The king was quiet for a moment. Then he gestured to his courtiers. Let the record show that seating arrangements for this dinner are adjusted. The royal family shall dine together, all of us at the center table, including Princess Lyra. A ripple of shock passed through the Keldari nobles. Lyra's hands trembled slightly on the table, though her expression remained controlled. Furthermore, the king continued, let it be known that the humans have taught us something valuable this day. They have shown us that different ways of perceiving can have merit. That limitation in one area does not mean limitation in all areas. That worth can be measured in ways beyond sensory capability. He stood, and the court rose with him. My daughter has sat in shadows for too long, ignored by those who should have valued her for qualities beyond sight. This was wrong. This will change. King Vorian extended his hand toward Lyra. She hesitated, clearly uncertain, then reached out. Her father guided her to stand, then led her toward the center of the hall. James followed at a respectful distance, aware that something significant was unfolding at the royal table. The king's other children stood in various states of surprise. King Vorian addressed them directly. Your sister is as much my child as any of you. She will be accorded the respect and position appropriate to her birth. Anyone who questions this will answer to me personally. The dinner proceeded with an entirely different atmosphere. Conversation flowed more freely, and for the first time, courtiers approached Lyra to speak with her. Awkward at first, but gradually more natural. James found himself answering countless questions about human perspectives on disability and worth, each answer seeming to shift something in how the Keldari viewed their own assumptions. Later, after the formal proceedings concluded, Lyra found James standing on one of the palace balconies that overlooked the underground city. Bioluminescent gardens spread out below, creating patterns of light she could not see, but could hear in the movement of air and the distant sounds of the city. You should not have done that, she said, though her tone held no anger. Probably not, James agreed. I'm sure I'll be lectured about proper diplomatic protocol when we return to the ship. Why did you? Because it was right. Because you deserved better than being invisible in your own home. Because sometimes the most important diplomatic achievement isn't in the formal negotiations, but in showing people a different way of seeing the world. Lyra moved to stand beside him at the railing. My father spoke to me after dinner. Really spoke to me, not at me or around me. He said he had been wrong. That grief over my condition had led him to distance himself, and over time, that distance became abandonment. He said your presence made him see that clearly. I'm glad. Things will not change overnight. The Keldari worldview is built on sensory perception. But perhaps there is room for growth, for understanding that different experiences of reality all have value. They stood together in comfortable silence, the blind princess and the human who had chosen to see her worth. Below them, the city glowed with alien beauty. And above them, though miles of stone separated them from the surface, stars neither of them could see continued their eternal dance. James, Lyra said eventually, thank you for standing beside me. Always, he replied, and meant it in the days that followed. The diplomatic mission achieved successes beyond what anyone had anticipated. But the greatest achievement was not recorded in any treaty or trade agreement. It existed in the changed dynamics of the Keldari court, where a blind princess now sat at her father's side, valued not despite her differences, but because she offered a unique perspective. It existed in the growing understanding between two species that worth could be measured in many ways, and it existed in a friendship between two beings from different worlds, built on the simple recognition that everyone deserves to be seen, even if they themselves cannot see.